And we are back with another episode of the Total Sports Live podcast. Man, it's been a minute since we said it's been a minute. It's been a minute since we said we're back with another episode of Total Sports Live podcast. But we're back on the first of the month. What a great time! Shout out to Bone Thugs and Harmony. I got a great show for everyone. Obviously, Jovan, Alford here, joined by my guys Harrison Brown, Nick Earnshaw. We got a lot to talk to you all about. Last time we did this podcast. We were talking about the NFL draft and and the Eagles and what could they do, who could they get. Had a pretty good draft, so I think we got some good karma going on with this podcast so far. So I gotta like our chances. Tonight. So we got, like I said, we got a lot to talk about. Talk about the Phillies, who have just been an utter disaster. The other Philadelphia team, not the Sixers, the Phillies, have just been horrible. And we're going to talk about the NBA Finals as well, which begins on Thursday night between the Boston Celtics and the Golden State Warriors. However, before we do all of that, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live. If you're watching this stream right now, you can see the little ticker at the bottom of your screen, which have all our Twitter handles right there. It's just going across the screen there for everybody that's tuning in to our recording on Twitter and Twitch as we do our recording. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Total Sports Live and checking out the podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, all those great places. Spotify, just search TSL Podcast, Total Sports Live, and then Anchor, same thing, the TSL Podcast. Appreciate everyone that tunes in, gives us a listen, download. You can leave us a rating or review on Spotify. That'd be cool too. So all those options there, and also totalsportslive.com. There's some content up there. We're gonna work and put some more stuff up there. The process, it takes a minute, but what I mean, we're gonna get it there. But let's talk about those Phillies, fellas. Harrison, Nick, it's been a minute since I have you guys on, since we did a pod. I know me and Harrison did a pod back in April with the draft, but it's been a minute since we had all of us back together in one setting. How are you all doing? Like I said, the Phillies have not been great this season, so that's one thing that we'll have to talk about. But before we get to the bad, how's everybody been doing?
Man, you said it. The Phillies haven't been great, but it's always great to be here on the TSL pod, man. You can't beat it. Great to be here with you fellas, Nick, Jovan. Always a pleasure, man. Let's have a great one.
Yeah, no, it's great to be with you guys once again. The Phillies, they have not been great, to say the least, this season. It's been a rough start for them to the start of this year. I mean, Joe Girardi, you're already hearing, is he going to be back in a couple of weeks? Like, is he going to be fired? You don't know. It's been crazy, some of the things that have happened, especially after all of the offseason moves we saw from the Philadelphia Phillies. So, they're off to a slow start this year. We're already in June. So, time's a ticking for this team to get back into contention, especially with the amount of money they spent in the offseason. But as always, great to be joined with you both. I mean, it's been a while. I can't wait to talk some Phillies with you guys.
Yeah, let's talk about those guys right now. Regular season woes, they have them. They haven't been good this year, despite spending all this money that they went in the offseason. They went absolutely ham. They said forget the salary cap, because there is none in baseball, but they said forget their own self-imposed salary cap. They go out, they get Kyle Schwarber, which kind of seemed like it was going to happen. Then they come back and say, you know what? We're going to get Nick Castellanos as well to go on that outfield. Defensively, it might not work, but offensively, they should be able to, overcome those things. But that has not happened, to say the least. They've struggled this season, fellas. They're 22-29. They share almost the same similar records when we're talking about wins with the likes of the Seattle Mariners, who've kind of taken a step back this year. They share almost same record with the Miami Marlins, the Pittsburgh Pirates, who are 21-27. They don't even have a real pitching staff, and the Phillies are playing ball like them. The Colorado Rockies have 22 wins. Let's see who else. The Guardians have 22 wins, and even the Orioles 21-30. Phillies are kind of in that company. Then we also have the Boston Red Sox with 23 wins. So not great company for the Phillies, to be in when you just list those teams and just, looking at how much money the Phillies have spent this offseason, looking at their payroll, it hasn't equaled out to a lot of wins. Like I said, they're 22-29. They snapped their 5-game losing streak tonight in a 6-5 win over the likes of the San Francisco Giants. They had a big, I think, 6 inning where they scored 4 in the 6. 2 home runs. Nick Maton, who was just called up, hit a 2-run shot, and then Kyle Schwarber one-handed a home run out of the ballpark, a la what he did at Citi Field a few weeks ago, and they were able to pull it out in a clean bullpen effort, which we haven't been able to say that a lot. But fellas, they're struggling. They're trailing the Mets by 12.5 games. They're probably only 6-7 games out of the wild card since the wild card's expanded. But I don't know if we can trust them to even make it to the wild card at this point with the way they're playing. How do you let's just start with this first question. How can this team get back to competitive baseball? Because it seemed like we've been asking for that with this team for years, right? They try to blow it up, rebuild, retool to get to the postseason, but it just haven't worked out for them as of yet.
Yeah, I would just say, I think that you're right. They have really tried to retool, restock the, artillery. They've tried to load up on these star pieces, and to not make the playoffs at this point, it is concerning. To have a start to a season like this year, definitely is concerning. I'll say this, they've definitely got some bats, man. The lineup is loaded top to bottom. They've got guys who can hit the ball when everybody's healthy. Obviously they're going to be without Segura. We're going to get into that, but it's a loaded lineup. They've got to clean things up on the back end of the pitching staff, the bullpen, and the fielding. Obviously that is a lot, but listen, the lineup is talented enough to where I think they can make the wild card. It's early, it's only May, but the division is looking like it's going to be tough. I mean, the Mets are 12 games ahead of them. They're going to get Scherzer and DeGrom back. They've got a loaded lineup as well. You can't count out the Braves either down the stretch, the defending world champs, obviously a real talented team. So I'm not really thinking the Phillies are going to be division contenders. What I think they can do is maybe add some pieces here and there, maybe try to get some guys healthy, bring some prospects up, Bryson Stott, the likes of that, get Nick Maton going. He's been playing some good ball recently, and try to just build this thing up, get the fielding better, try to get some better, innings from the bullpen. That they've got to get that going. The bullpen has been a real liability recently. And I think just in general, kind of clean things up as a whole.
Yeah, I kind of echo the same thing that Harrison said. The bullpen really, I think, is the issue for the Philadelphia Phillies at this point with a 4.22 ERA on the season. That is not going to get it done. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. They get to these late inning ball games. You get into the 8th, 9th inning, even go into extra innings. They have a lead or they're tied up, and the guys in the bullpen just can't hold a lead. So, and even at the Phillies, they come back, they take a lead themselves. The offense gets something going. The bullpen just gives it right back. So that's been a real concern throughout this entire season so far. And I was worried about it going into the season. You spent a lot of money on Castellanos, Schwarber. He's also underperformed, especially with his batting average being under 200. You're missing out on a lot of different things when it comes to your pitching staff, because when your pitching staff is not going to be up to par like the Phillies is, I mean, listen, their offense isn't bad. I mean, look at some of the numbers. I mean, they're not playing awful. Harper's still batting over 3. You still have Castellanos doing an okay job at the plate. You like more production out of Real Muto, Hoskins, and those guys, but they've had opportunities to win games, and the bullpen has really struggled as of late. And some of the decisions by Joe Girardi as well. You have the 3-day rule that he likes to implement, and he didn't follow it the other night. It makes no sense to me. I mean, the one guy that's been pretty good out of the pen is Sir Anthony Dominguez. I mean, I think he's been probably the most reliable guy out of this bullpen. But I think going into the season, you knew that the offense was probably going to be a little bit better than you would think, adding Castellanos, Schwarber, all these different guys. But they spent a little bit of money on the bullpen, Brad Hand, etc. It just wasn't enough. You didn't get these top flight relievers, and they just have not shown up. And when you're not able to close out ball games like the Phillies have been, not just this year, but in years past, it's going to be hard for them in a division where in the Atlanta Braves. I mean, how are you going to compete? I mean, you're going to have to compete some way in the wild card. You get an extra wild card spot this year. That's really all I see them doing this year, if they can, find a way to start stringing together some victories.
Yeah, most definitely. Like you said, the ceiling for this team right now is to try to get into the wild card. Right? There's no way they're going to compete with the Mets for the division. The Mets have just been playing outstanding, baseball under Buck Showalter. They're doing it on all phases, right? They're getting good pitching, they're getting, good offense, from their lineup top to bottom. And they're playing solid defense. I mean, when you have those three things working, you're going to win a lot of ball games. And the Mets are kind of almost looking like the Giants from last year, where they're just cooking and they're just winning they're winning games and they're winning series. They might lose games here and there, but we know in baseball, right? You can lose games here and there, but you got to win series, right? And that's one thing the Phillies haven't, been able to do despite their win, on Wednesday night. They still haven't won a series at home since late April, where they swept the Rockies in 4 games. So they have to start putting wins together. They have to put in series, wins together. And when, like you said, Nick, you look at and we talked about this earlier this morning, right? Like you look at the team, like just their stats, they're not bad. Like the stats are not equaling up to the plate on the field, and that's the most puzzling part, right? Because you mentioned the offense. The offense has been playing, been solid. And coming into tonight's game, they had a 297 batting average on balls in play. That's pretty good. That's top 10 in the majors. That means you're putting the ball in play, but you're not doing anything, with it. Even if you look at the runs per game, they're scoring almost 4.5 runs a game, and it's still not equal. It's still not equaling up. And something that I thought was more interesting about this team is that, looking at their starting pitchers, they're one coming into, Wednesday, they're one of 6 teams with 20 or more quality starts from their starting pitchers. Quality start, is, pitcher going at least 6 innings and allow 3 or fewer runs. The only other teams that are in that conversation are Toronto, Cleveland, Milwaukee, San Diego, and Houston. It's not a bad bunch of teams that the Phillies are up there with in terms of pitching, but they're still, the statistics are not equaling to wins in good play on the field.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you look at their 11th in batting average, they're 9th in slugging, and around that top, all these different categories, but they're not. It's about timely hitting, and they don't get those timely hits. And it goes back to the bullpen. When they do get those timely hits, the bullpen doesn't save it. So, I mean, it's all about timing in baseball. And, late in these games, the bullpen has not been able to hold some of these leads that the offense has given this pitching staff. So, really where the biggest problem lies. And, you can give some of the blame to Joe Girardi too. I mean, you definitely can. I mean, he's made some questionable decisions with regarding to who comes in and when they come in. I think it's the bullpen. The key is at right now for the Philadelphia Phillies. They have to go out there and they have to find a way to close out games. If you're not going to close out games, you don't have Brad Litch from 2008 anymore. You're not that good as a bullpen. You haven't been that good in a long time. So I think even with how good the offense has been, right, hanging around the top 10 in a lot of these categories, the bullpen just has not gotten it done. They just have not been able to hold a lead. And when you can't hold a lead in baseball, you're not going to win a lot of ball games.
Most definitely, you're definitely right about that. The ball, and that's been the biggest crux, right? With them losing some of the games they've lost, just in May, right? There've been a lot of situations. I mean, Corey Knebel giving up, home runs. I mean, guys, giving up home runs in extra innings, right? Where you're seeing Girardi, like you said, he has the 3-day rule, and you feed him, throw out, Nick Bellotti, and Brad Hand, Familia.
Didn't Dominguez have one pitch the other night, and he still went with that rule? I don't understand that either. That's mind-boggling to me.
It's puzzling. There's a lot of puzzling things, that he's done, as a manager. Which brings us, to this next question, right? That if the Phillies, struggles continue and they miss the playoffs this year, which right now it looks like that's a strong possibility that they might, should they look to make a change at manager during, in the offseason, and or honestly, if things get bad, like we're talking about, this team falls like by the All-Star break, they're like 20 games out of like first place in the NL East. Should they move on from, Girardi during the season? I know people say that's not something that Dave Dombrowski does, but if this team somehow goes on a slide, right, especially when the schedule is apparently supposed to be like the easier part of the schedule as they went through like the gauntlet to start the year. Like, if things don't get better, should they move on from him during the regular season?
Well, listen, it may not be Dave Dombrowski's thing, but the Phillies have done it before. We saw it with Charlie Manuel back in the day. So there's some history to it. It's not something they've, not been opposed to in the past. I will say this, though. I think Joe Girardi is a really talented overall manager. He's a good clubhouse guy. He's a guy with a lot of experience. That being said, we're in year 3 now. He's had 3 seasons here. Obviously, there's the COVID year in there, which is a awkward year for everyone. But with all the talent in this organization, pitching staff, lineup, with all the talent they have, there's really no reason that they shouldn't have been in the playoffs in any of these years. We've seen in the past few years, Washington win a World Series, the Braves win a World Series. It's tough to see teams in your division winning a World Series when the Phillies haven't made the playoffs in a decade. So, if they were to miss the playoffs this year, I definitely think it would be something they should look into, making a change at that manager position. But I am a Joe Girardi fan. I think he's a good manager. I think he's the right guy for the job. I don't think that there's anybody out there right now, that they could pull in midseason from the coaching staff, or, and they wouldn't go out and just hire someone from out and about at this point in the season. But I just think Joe Girardi is the right guy for the job. I think he could have a future here. Like, if they can get it together and win some games and maybe make the playoffs, Joe Girardi could stay as the manager, but they've definitely got to have a winning season this year. And I would say they've definitely got to make at least a wild card.
Most definitely. What about you, Nick? What do you say about the whole Girardi? Should he go? Should he stay? Because there's a lot. We see social media, right? We see Twitter.
Yeah.
They do not let off Girardi, and for good reason. This guy, he's been given a team that's pretty much, has a lot of talent in it, but the talent again hasn't materialized to consistent wins and victories.
Yeah, I think Harrison makes a really good point. Yeah, you could move on from Girardi right now, but who are you going to replace him with? That's the ultimate question. Who's going to replace Joe Girardi? I saw a Jim Leland today. I don't know if that happens. I know the connection between him and Dombrowski, at some point, especially back in Detroit. But it's such an interesting situation, because who are you going to replace Girardi with at this point in the season? Just are you going to throw anyone out there? But I think the question really has to be, is with upper management. Did they build the roster correctly? Did they go out and just spend all this money on these hitters? Castellanos, he's had a pretty good year. Schwarber has not, average wise, has been dipped below 200. You bring up Bryson Stott, Bohm's still here. But they didn't spend any money on the bullpen. So that's a question of team building. So is that up in management right now? So that's another aspect of it that I think needs to be looked at. Yeah, Joe Girardi, he's had some mishaps for sure. Definitely could, get canned at some point in this season within a couple of weeks. Who knows? Depending on how these next stretch of games goes. But I think looking at how they built this team, you just put a bunch of power hitters. You're not going to hit a home run every single night. I get it's a Citizens Bank Park, but you just string together base runners and get guys on base, and you just put in a bunch of guys who can hit for power. Yeah, they might strike out a lot though too. So I think the question then becomes, all right, how did we get to this point? What is the problem? I don't think it's all Joe Girardi. He can only do so much as a manager. He can't go out there and make plays, and we've seen the mistakes in the field as well. So I think you have to look at management at this point and how they went and spent their money. You go get Schwarber, but you had some money to go into the luxury tax. All right, you go get Castellanos, but you spent on these middle type guys, middle type relievers that I just think are okay, and they've proven that it's still not to be enough for this Philadelphia Phillies team. It's just, and then the injuries have not helped with Didi Gregorius and now Gene Segura too.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, right? When we talk about, like you said, the way they spent their money, right? They got the big bats, right? Which, a lot of people wanted to see, them to go get some big bats, make a splash for you. Make a splash. They go get, Schwarber and Castellanos. Schwarber has had a rough time, you could say adjusting, being in the Phillies lineup. Girardi's trying to move them around, a little bit. I don't necessarily know if Schwarber is a leadoff guy. I think his leadoff, history last year, I think was a great epiphany where he was just on that ridiculous tear last year at the Nets. I think he hit like 10 home runs or something like that. It was just ridiculous. If you don't remember that, literally every time Kyle Schwarber came with the bat, it was literally a home run. Like he was just in a next level, zone. But he hasn't been able to find that success there. And for me, I always thought that Gene Segura should be at the top of your leadoff, spot, especially when he's locked in. I think he can create a little bit, but now he's out for 10 to 12 weeks with a broken finger. That kind of, changes, everything. Then, like you said, they spend money on relievers, but Brad Hand hasn't been nothing great for, a veteran guy. Like you said, Familia hasn't been great. Knable really wasn't a closer in LA. It was more so like, a very good, setup, middle inning guy. So this first time being a closer, got a different mentality. I've seen people, bring up, that they should, give, Morales a chance, instead of letting him sit in the minors. Like, you ain't got nothing to lose right at this point. Like, bring them up, see what you can get. And I think I feel like that's going to start to be the thing with this team, is that the fans are just like, all right, if you guys aren't going to really win consistently, then you got to start giving the kids a chance, right? You got to see what you have there. We see Stott been up and down. Moniak finally, came back after, getting hurt, which was a real bummer. He got hurt, but at the expense, they really suffered in the outfield without him, especially with the spring he was having. And then there's other guys, I think, that's in the minors that probably could help this team right now, that they're trying to just, they're almost doing what the Sixers do, where they just latch onto the veterans and hope the veterans can, like, bring them through. And it's like, no, you got to give the kids a chance and see what they're going to do, because there's only so much they're going to learn, in AAA. AAA is just basically the majors. It's not the top talent. And this is no disrespect what I'm about to say. AAA is not where the top talent is at. It's in AA. It's in single A. Like, that's where the top guys are, like, smoking and hitting the ball and pitching. It's not AAA. So it's a lot. I think it's a lot that this team got to, deal with, and it falls on both. Like you said, it falls on manager, falls on players, starts on the front office, everybody has a piece, of this pie.
And they've struggled with developing players for years now. Like, if you look at their organization, how many homegrown players are in the lineup now? Like Nola and Reese. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, I mean, besides guys like Nick Maton and Bryson Stott, but how many developed major league ready players are in there? You know what? It's not many. Just overall, Eflin, but just overall, it's not very many. And it's not very many established guys who are, lighted up superstars. So it's definitely been a problem for a while, and it's something they've got to clean up if they're going to get back to being a contender.
Remember Spencer Howard and how Spencer Howard was supposed to be the next, great thing. And it's just like, we're waiting for Spencer Howard to come up, and it's like he finally comes up and he has like a great 4 innings and then just falls down.
He couldn't go past 3 innings. Remember, he couldn't go past 3 innings. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that, Harrison and Jovan, because I mean, this team has not developed players in about 15 years. It's been a long time since they've developed some really good talent coming from their farm system. I mean, Hoskins is really, and Nola are really the only two that come to mind. I mean, Alec Boehm's had some trouble. Spencer Howard, remember the Dominic Brown days. I mean, this is an underlying problem, and that goes back when you can't.
My guy, Dominic Brown.
Yeah, when you can't develop players, you have to go out and spend on the Castellanos. You have to go out and spend on the Schwarbers because you haven't grown any talent. And I think that's a part of the issue as well. I think that's a broader issue that the Phillies have had, other than some of the things on the field. And, going back to Jovan talking about the bullpen, I mean, Familia the other night forgot to cover first base. It's these fundamental things that the Phillies aren't doing right. And it's put them in such a bad spot. Yeah, going back to developing players, I think that has been the broadest issue for the Phillies over the past few years. But looking at it at the micro, and this year it's been the bullpen. But yeah, going back, I mean, they have not developed a lot of good talent heading into the major leagues. I mean, Spencer Howard, I mean, he was a huge deal coming up for the Phillies, and he comes up and you can't get past 3 innings as a starter. So
No.
and he gets moved. So it's been a rough go for the Phillies in the farm system. They bring in Mattingly this year, Mattingly's son, as a new development coordinator or whatever. So, and Eric, to see what he has. He's a big pitcher that they drafted last year in the first round. I know Larry Bow is really excited about him.
Yeah, they definitely. I think that's the best thing if you're a Philly fans you can hope for is that the talent is there in the minors. You just hope that the Phillies don't, and this has been a problem that's gone back all the way to Ryan Howard, right? Leaving guys in the minors for longer than they should be. And you don't get, the best, right? And you hope that Andrew Painter and, Mick Abel and Logan O'Hoppe, really become that next generation of, like you said, homegrown talent that can lead this team into the future. Because like you said, you have to spend big bucks because you don't have the guys that kind of be like, yeah, like I can point them and say he's coming up in the minors 2 years. He's going to be an everyday starter. They don't have that. And I just, I just pulled up Spencer Howard's stats. He's currently in AAA Round Rock with the Round Rock Express, Texas Rangers organization. Shout out to the Round Rock Express. I used them very frequently in my Rangers franchise on the show. Spencer Howard this season in Round Rock has a 6.28 ERA in 4 appearances. As a starter, he's been starting down there, but still, again, not putting it together. As of yet. Hopefully he'll figure it out. Also forget about, Sixto Sanchez, right? But, he hasn't, been able to stay healthy, right? So it's been a health thing. Or Adonis Medina, there's countless names. And it
Scott
just
Kingery.
hasn't worked out for. Yeah.
Scotty Jetpacks.
And he's still in the minors.
Yep.
Minors. And they gave him didn't they give him like a 6-year, $24 million deal or something like that?
Yeah, they locked him up. I thought Scott Kingery was going to be good, and he fell off as well. So, I mean, they can't get players to get going once they get to the majors. And Alec Boehm's had a lot of trouble in the field.
Thank goodness Alec Boehm has started to pick it up, at the plate. He's really started to figure it out. A lot of people think Alec Boehm could potentially be your next first baseman, if they move off of Rhys Hoskins, he could be that next first baseman. But that's neither here or there with, that position in particular. But before we do wrap up and move off of Phillies talk about the NBA Finals, real quick, last topic of discussion here. We're in June. July is coming up, which means All-Star breaks coming up, which also means trade rumors, trade deadline. The hot stove is going to be up and popping. Where do we think this team will be when the trade rumors heat up, right? If they're somehow, God forbid, 20 games out, do they start selling off players? And if so, who do they give away? Because I don't know if they have anything that's worth, giving away. I've heard people on the radio float around the idea of trading away JT Realmuto. I wouldn't do that yet, but I mean, you cannot put anything off the table if they somehow, go off the deep end. But on the inverse, say if they somehow are only like 4 games out or something like that. Like, it can happen like that. Like, what do y'all think this team will be at by the time we get to the, the trade deadline?
It's tough to say. I mean, optimistically, I want to say that they're going to be buying. I want to say that they're going to go and try to add, from somebody's bullpen, try to add some more pieces to that. Maybe another bat, maybe another back end starter. But I mean, just the thought of if they do kind of fall off that deep end, if they're 15 to 20 games out, if the wild card's not looking very realistic, if there's some other teams in that mix, the idea of trading Rhys Hoskins isn't something that I'm very opposed to. I know that his contract is beginning to run out, that's going to be done soon. I think if you could kind of get a few pieces back, even if it's not what it could have been a few years ago because his contract's about to be up, if you could just get a few pieces back, kind of put some more things down on the farm, put some more pieces to the puzzle, wouldn't be opposed to it. Maybe some of the bullpen, maybe you move a guy like Corey Knebel, maybe it just didn't work. Maybe Brad Hand gets moved. This is, hypothetically. Things of that nature. It's intriguing to think about. Obviously it's not optimistic, but if that were to happen, it is a way that they could try to retool the farm system.
Yeah, Harrison, I think I'm with you. I mean, they have a tough time coming up soon. I mean, you have the Angels and then the Brewers, and then it starts to cool off a little bit. You have the Diamondbacks, the Marlins, but they've had trouble with the Marlins for a while. Then the Nationals, so they have an opportunity to get back in it. I mean, that wild card spot. I mean, you have that third spot now. You're 6 games out at this point, so they're a little bit ways away. I mean, the division, I think you could say that's goodbye here at this point, especially the way they've been playing. Yeah, Hoskins is definitely a guy you could see getting moved for sure. I mean, he's had a lot of trouble here so far early on the season with the bat. I don't know if I'm moving off Real Muto just yet, but if they want to buy, you got to go after the bullpen. But I just don't know what they have to give up. I mean, you're going to have to give up a Hoskins. Are you going to give up a Bohm at this point? I'm very curious. I think, June and the first part of July, when we get to that All-Star break, Dombrowski's going to have a lot of decisions to make. I mean, I think these next few series are really going to determine what the Phillies are going to do at the deadline. I saw a report earlier today. I think there's still remaining buyers. I don't think that could be a possibility, especially if they keep losing series like they have been. Against the Angels this week, that's going to be tough. Against Ohtani, the Brewers are a very good team. You're going to have to play against them coming up. So I think the month of June is going to be the most crucial for the Phillies this season, no doubt, especially going into the trade deadline. Hoskins could get moved on. You could see a team that gets blown up at the deadline. It would not shock me. But if you want to get prospects back, that means you're saying to Bryce Harper, hey, we're retooling. So then you're going to go down that path. I'm very curious to see what the month of June brings for the Phillies.
Yeah, if you thought May was important for this team, June is very important. But the good news, they are 1-0 in the month of June. Now let's see if they can stay above 500.
That's what we like to see. That's what we like to see.
Again, we're not asking the Phillies to go on 5-game winning streaks, 6-game winning streaks. That'd be nice, but just win some series. Just 3-game series, take 2 out of 3. If it's a 4-game, take 3 out of 4. You start doing that, you can get yourself back into playing some type of winning baseball. I mean,
Jovan, you make it sound so simple for the Phillies.
I know, and it's not that simple. Even though I've been watching the Pittsburgh Pirates, on the verge of sweeping the LA Dodgers. I mean, it's just
Phillies almost did that. They almost did that, and then they fell apart again. So
I mean that West Coast trip was so amazing. 5-2 against the Mariners and the Dodgers. It was a great time, but alas, they couldn't replicate that at home. But we'll see how everything, floats off and see how everything plays out with the Phillies this summer. Should be interesting one way or another. All right, let's switch gears here, talking about some basketball, not those Sixers. That's a whole different story for a whole another day, and how things went down with them. Whole different story there. But we got to talk about some positives with basketball, and that is the NBA Finals. The finals are here. Celtics, Warriors. Tomorrow night, 9:00, Chase Center, Game 1 should be a very exciting series. Warriors, have been dominant at home this season, 9-0 at the Chase Center. They've been impressive at home this season. Beat the Dallas Mavericks in the Western Conference Finals, so they're looking like the team. They're looking like their old selves, and could potentially, Steph and company could win their 4th ring in as many years, which would be just amazing for them and how in that dynasty that they've created. And then there's also the Celtics on the other, and the antithesis of what you would say the process is for the Sixers, as they've drafted up there a little high with the Sixers over the years. And they ended up with Tatum and Brown, and kind of in the mole, Al Horford, who is back in Celtics green, and he's found his powers again. So when you have that, you have those two teams. Celtics went through a very tough 7-game series against the Miami Heat. Won Game 7. They've actually won their last 2 series against the Bucks and Milwaukee in 7. So they've been through the ringer and somehow been able to do it with former Sixers assistant coach Ime Udoka, by the way. So I mean, there's just so many knives here just going into the side of Sixers fans. But looking at this game, fellas, did anybody think that the Celtics would be in this spot, especially with how they were looking earlier in the season? And then they eventually, they started to put it, they got their act together, specifically on defense, becoming one of the better defensive teams in the league. And you got to give credit to Ime Udoka for, doing this in his first year, getting his team to this spot, taking that team to the level that Brad Stevens couldn't get them to, because it's basically the same team, but Udoka was able to pull something out of them that Brad Stevens, wasn't able, to get them to.
Definitely didn't see the Celtics making it all the way to the finals, especially like you mentioned with all the, game sevens, just the ringer that they had to go through to get here. But this is a team that plays a real good team basketball, man. I know we're down here in the Philadelphia area. We were all hoping the Sixers were going to make it this year with the addition of James Harden and the moves that they made. But like you said, Jovan, another story for another day. I'll leave that be. But no, definitely. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, I am happy for the Celtics in a way. Like you said, it is kind of cool to see I'm take them to a level that Brad Stevens wasn't able to. A lot of different circumstances for that. LeBron James is tough to go against in the playoffs and stuff like that if we're going way back. But, the Celtics played good team basketball. They're not going to be an easy out for the Warriors. Definitely think the Warriors are the team to beat. Definitely, if I was a betting man, I would put my money on the Warriors. But the Celtics are not going to be an easy out. I could definitely see it going to 6-7 games and being a real competitive and fun series that people look back on for a while.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great series. Boston, I did not think they were going to get this far into the playoffs. I mean, you went through the Bucks as well as the Miami. I mean, you got props to them. Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart. I mean, they played extremely, extremely well so far in these playoffs, and they're not done. I mean, this is no easy test for the Golden State Warriors at all. The Warriors have had some trouble with the Celtics throughout the year, and Marcus Smart has done a pretty good job against Steph Curry. I was going to say Seth Curry, former Philadelphia 76er. But no, I think it's going to be a really good series. You got to give credit to Boston. I mean, they play tremendous defense out on the perimeter. They've really put it together with Tatum and Brown. I mean, early on in the season, they were having a little bit of trouble. They were down in the standings, and they've made the comeback towards the end of the year. And those last, if you Philadelphia 76ers, you are just kicking yourself right now. Al Horford, somehow, some way, I just, it makes no sense to me at all how he even got back to where he was with the Boston Celtics at his previous time. But now, listen, they're in a good spot. Boston is. I think that they're going to play good defense against the Golden State team. I'm still going with Golden State in this series because I think when you have shooters like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson able to space the floor like they have, I think they're going to be in a good spot to win another title for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm same thing with you guys. I didn't think the Celtics were going to get to this point. Just when you look at the road that they had to do just in the playoffs to get to this point, right? They got past the Nets, which you kind of thought they were going to get past them just because their Nets team wasn't the same. A lot of things going on with them, and then they get past the Nets, and then they take on the Bucks team, who they went 7 with them, and I think maybe Milwaukee wins that series if they have Chris Middleton, who they didn't have because he was out due to injury. And then you look on the other side of the bracket, there was a chance that they could have ran into the Sixers, Miami, Toronto, maybe. They could have ran into one of those 3 teams. They end up getting running through Miami, and they almost, if you remember from Game 7, they almost choked it away there at the last moment in those last 3 minutes. I was screaming at my TV, and I'm not even a Celtics fan. I was saying, what are you doing? Why are you guys shooting the ball? Why are you pulling up from 3? Milk the clock. Get some good buckets, and they weren't. But the good thing was the under did hit in that game, so I'm not mad at it. So when you look, like you said, the fact they even got to this point is impressive. Now, can they put it all together in their first ever finals against a veteran team for the most part? Most of the guys from that team, not most, about what, 3, 4, about 4, no, 5. Iguodala, Looney, Draymond, Steph, Clay, about 5 guys that have been through the war. Can they get past that? I don't know. I will say that I think that this finals will be much more competitive than what we've seen, throughout the NBA playoffs in these last 2 rounds, in the Western Conference Finals, the Eastern Conference Finals, and even the semis. I think it'll be very competitive. Originally, I had Warriors in 5, but I think that was ignorant of me being a little bullish. But I'm not going to be that disrespectful. I think Warriors take this in 6. I think it's going to be a very competitive series. I think it's going to be a good series of matchups, of just playmaking, of scoring, offensive scoring, just individual scoring. I think it's going to be just amazing basketball. But I like the Warriors to come out and take this in 6. I think Warriors take this in 6. So we got that there, and let's talk about this other question that we did bring up, amongst ourselves. And this is a question that Nick pulled together, and I think it's a very interesting question. And that is, does the Celtics making it to the finals put even more pressure and Morey and company to get the off season right? This is a very huge question because they're in the same division. They've drafted a couple players before the Sixers that panned out to be something, but that wasn't Morey's regime. It was the Colangelo big collar era. It was that regime. It was Hinkie too. That was Hinkie as well. I think Hinkie as well had a hand in that, but nobody knew Ben Simmons how that was going to play out with that, and Markelle didn't pan out the way it was supposed to. But that's neither here or there. We're talking about the future, and we're talking about the future and the present right now. What do you guys think? If the Celtics somehow end up winning this finals, which would just be downright incredible, what do you think the Sixers would have to even do to be on that level, to get up to that level? Because if the Celtics win, they're now putting the gold standard, and we see this in sports all the time, right? Once one team makes the championship or wins it all, there starts to be copycats. Everybody starts copying what this team doing and that team doing. Like, what do you think the Sixers would have to do to even reach the level to be the Celtics to get into the finals?
Yeah, for me, I think for the 76ers, this is a huge offseason. You're going to have to find more perimeter guys. I think their bench is really what kind of held them back a little bit. Obviously, the Embiid injuries didn't help. That's not going to help Sixers when broken, basically, in a broken face. Hopefully Embiid can just stay healthy throughout the entirety of the postseason next season and throughout the year as well. I think it really comes down to what they do with James Harden. I think James Harden, he'll take a little bit less. I don't think, less to say, hey, the Sixers, they need some guys around their bench to get some shooting off the bench, play a little defense. Danny Green, he got hurt at the end of the playoffs last year, this past season, I should say. So, we don't know where he's at, especially with his age at this point. What do you do with Matisse Thybulle? I think, obviously he's a great defender. He can defend on the perimeter. It was a high point, I think, of the Sixers keeping him in that James Harden deal. So I think you keep him at this point of where you're at, but you're going to have to find more shooting off the bench. And space the floor. You've seen the rumors with Bradley Beal. Can you move off the Tobias Harris contract? Do you even want to move off Tobias Harris? Because I thought he fit in pretty nicely throughout the playoffs and had a pretty good playoff, to say the least. So I think the Sixers, they're going to have to get more bench depth. That is number one and key. I think they keep Harden. Do you go get another star? I don't know how you mesh a Beal, a Harden, and Embiid. I think that's very curious to me. I'm very curious to see how that would shake out. But you'd have to move off to Tobias Harris and see what other options are out there. So I think for the 76ers, it's finding those guys who could score. Maxey, he's turning into a star. We know what he's capable of. I think, you've seen some noise that they could move on from him in a Bradley Beal type deal. That should not happen whatsoever. You got to keep Tyrese Maxey. He has been unbelievable and he's a star in the making. So I think the Sixers, it's about finding bench depth. It just depends how much money they have. And, now they have that pick in the draft from the Nets. So I think, they can definitely do some damage, and and Daryl Morey's drafted very well over the past few seasons.
No, I definitely agree with you there, Nick. I think they need to add, obviously we saw that in the last 2 years, really. It's been just very much so on display. I thought the Harden move was a nice move. I thought he fit well with Joel in the beginning. Obviously, things did kind of fall off at the end. It wasn't really the same. Weren't getting that offensive production you were looking for in the playoff series. Joel even mentioned it. This isn't the same James Harden as it was in Houston. With that being said, very talented player. This is a name brand in the league. People on defense, they're going to have to give James Harden respect. You know what I mean? You have to put someone very, valid on him to cover him. So I like where the Sixers are. I like the infrastructure they have. Doc Rivers is a talented coach. That's another one. Same thing with Joe Girardi. People are on him. People are, you know what I mean? Maybe they should get rid of Doc. I'm kind of in the same boat. Who are you going to bring in to replace Doc? You know, I think that Doc is definitely one of the more established coaches in the league. And I think that he can win a championship here with the Sixers. Obviously, he's had his playoff struggles, but, you know, I think that he's the right type of coach to lead them. So I like where the Sixers are. Obviously, you know, the question at hand here is, does the Celtics making the finals put some more pressure on the Sixers? Definitely, you know, for sure. You know, the fan base is about to watch the Celtics play in an NBA championship. The Sixers still haven't been. If there wasn't already pressure, you know, considering all the talent they have and how close they've been these past few years, you know, there's definitely going to be more pressure next year.
Certainly will be. And like you got said, right, it all starts with the James Harden. What did he do with Harden? Does he opt in? Does he take a little bit less money, you know, on a longer term deal to kind of free up that money? Do they make any potential moves? Like you said, do they move off of Tobias Harris? But do you want to move off of Tobias Harris from the way he played in the postseason? It was essentially your second or third best player, you know, better than James Harden for the most part of the playoffs. Do you feel comfortable moving off of him? What do you do with Matisse Thybulle? If you keep Thybulle, does he take that next step in his development, you know, as a 3-and-D guy? Because it's all about, he has a defense, just now putting the offense together. Can he take that next step as an offensive player? And like you, and for me, you know, like you mentioned, they have the number 23 overall pick in the draft. You have to go out and get athletic wings. I think this year finals just shows us, or in this year's playoffs, right, that the younger talent can play, and it helps. It gives you bench depth. I mean, Boston, look at who their two wings are: Tatum and Brown. Definitely higher pedigree of player, right? Because they were drafted top 5, you know, players, but talented wings. You look at Golden State. They traded and got Andrew Wiggins, who's been excellent, really excellent there. But you look at who they drafted a couple years ago at pick number 29, Jordan Poole. It's been a revelation. You see that. You look at Jonathan Kuminga getting minutes, Moses Moody getting minutes, and I can think of countless of other teams, you know, Memphis getting their young guys, you know, involved, you know, and playing minutes. And I think that's another thing for the Sixers, right? We know they have the number 23 overall pick. The question is, are they going to use the number 23 overall pick? And if they use them, are they actually going to let the guy play? I think I saw a tweet today, and someone was like, and it was like the Sixers got number 23 overall pick, and the person was like, congratulations to the Delaware Blue Coats. It's messed up to think that way, but it's you have to say that, right? Because young players don't really, you know, play on the team. I mean, shoot, Jayton Springer was down in Delaware, you know, the whole season. And I don't think that was a bad thing for him, because I think there just wouldn't have been no minutes for him. And I think he got better, and I think this summer league will be the telling sign for him if he can make the rotation. But the head coach has to be open playing young guys. The head coach has to be open and playing Paul Reed, not in the playoffs when he's forced to. He has to play Charles Bassey instead of saying, we're going to give you DeAndre Jordan and Paul Millsap at the 5. Poor Paul Millsap was getting abused at the 5. I mean, Isaiah Joe was basically on the bench after having a pretty good season before in the G League bubble, had a very good summer league with Maxey and Paul Reed, and he was sitting on the bench for most of the year. So you see that I just named off 4 young players that can help your bench right now if you give them the minutes and let them play. But that's something that they're going to have to figure out, and I think it's going to have that like coming to Jesus moment for the organization, is that if you're going to use this number 23 overall pick, because I don't think fans are going to be like, oh yeah, they drafted a first round guy and they don't want to see him in like Delaware. They don't want to see him in Delaware. They want to see him actually play. And they need guys. And I think this draft, they can find somebody at number 23. It's just that will they let whoever they draft at number 23 overall play? That's going to be the key. And I think that would be the ultimate difference maker, because I don't think they're going to do much in free agency. They might be able to get a couple of veterans here and there, but nothing really worth, I think, so far. Now I think that they could potentially give up, but it's still early in that process. I think that's it. I think we knocked down everything off our list for our first podcast back in the saddle. Great to have been doing this with everyone. It's been fun. Like I said, we'll be back again we're going to try to do this weekly, so we're definitely going to be back again doing this weekly. Who knows? Maybe the Phillies will be better next week by the time we talk to them. Who knows? Maybe they might be 20 games out next week. It could be that way. And then, we'll eventually talk about some Eagles because we're getting closer to training camp. So definitely we'll talk about some training camp stuff and anything else that happens, not only in Philadelphia sports, but in the wide world of sports. But fellas, before we wrap up, anything else that we missed on the docket? Appreciate y'all once again taking the time out to do this.
Always a pleasure, man. Appreciate y'all. Always fun to talk to you guys. Definitely tune in to any of Nick's calls down with Wilmington. Blue Rock season. You know what I mean? We're in full swing. All right. Right. Won the jersey tonight in the raffle. So now me and Jovan are gonna have to get down to Wilmington, catch a game this year. But man, appreciate you guys. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's echo what Harrison said. It was great to be with you guys again. It's been a little bit. Can't wait to get these rolling consistently. It's gonna be fun, man. It's gonna be a fun summer. Can't wait to talk Eagles with you guys too. Yeah, talking Eagles is always a fun time. So, but yeah, I'll be down in Wilmington this summer calling some Blue Rocks games. So I'll be down there. Say hello if you're down in Wilmington catching a Blue Rocks game. So I'll definitely be down there. And I got something for Planet Phillies coming very soon. So just stay tuned for that as well.
Yes, stay tuned for Planet Philly because we already know whenever we have something new, that new episode will be in your podcast feeds ASAP. Don't play. It will be there. And Harrison has some interviews that he's been doing. Over the last few weeks, been doing the draft podcast, and he's, interviewed the GM of the Philadelphia Fusion.
Yep.
Ronston U. So he's been knocking out these interviews. So make sure y'all check that out on his YouTube page as well. Got to make sure we plug that. We can't forget.
Appreciate that, man. About to talk to Kenneth Farrow in about 4 minutes. I'm hoping he doesn't hop in the Zoom before me.
Hopefully not. So with that being said, everyone have a good one. We'll talk to you guys next week. Hopefully the Phillies won't be an utter disaster, but we'll see. You just never know what happens in Philadelphia sports. So for me, Nick, Harrison, everyone have a good one. We'll talk to you all very soon.